model that everybody's talking about, and rightfully so. It's just amazing how it goes together. I mean, I'm always leery of these advertisements that, oh, it just falls together. This thing falls together. Case in point, these stabilators that fit on, normally you would put those on. I mean, look at the fit. It just fits in there. It's just got a natural seam where a seam would be. It's just a great model. So what I'm going to do, you can see, I'll give you the basic outline on this Tomcat. This Tomcat is circa 1988, and the U.S. Navy had a series of colorful airplanes through the 50s and 60s, and then they started to get into these kinds of camouflages because they were easy to maintain, and they didn't have, because of the salt and the corrosive atmospheres that they faced at sea. Whenever they would just touch these things up, they would just touch them up. They would just grab gray. Now the basic outline for this plane is camouflage is this. On top we have a darker gray, and that darker gray will cover the top and the wings. And we have kind of a medium gray, a ghost gray, that's fitting on the underside of the wings and on the outside of the intakes. This particular one has even a lighter gray in the middle, and you can actually see it if you look a little bit. But the thing with these camouflages is they're not really defined when you look at them. Here's a photograph of the one I'm doing, and you can see the dark gray there and then the grays here, and they tend to model and weather. Now the US Navy, when it paints its camouflages, they're always taking panels off. So what they'll do is when they take a panel off, they'll paint the outside of the edges to cover up any bare metal or chips, and then they put the panel back. And so you can get some distinctive wear, and again, I've got more work to do here. I've just got to play with it, but you'll get more distinctive wear on the outside of the panels where they'll be lighter. So normally, aviation, they always tell you when you're painting, hit your panel lines with the darker color and then go light in the middle. It tends to be a little bit opposite with these modern contemporary camouflages, where the middle seems to be darker and the edges seem to be lighter. Okay? So that's kind of the effect you're trying to achieve. Now, I'll paint a few things tonight, and I'll just show you some basic steps of what you can do, because it takes them outside of the realm of looking like toys. And I mean, there's some good painters in the club, and one thing I want to say is you're always learning things. I mean, I went over to Duncan's the other day, and I probably learned 3 or 4 new things just watching what he does. And, I've always said that people always go, I read beginners' books on modeling all the time, because people go, it's a waste of time, I'm not a beginner. But you'd be amazed, you can never stop learning things, right? There's always people that do things differently and maybe better than you do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot some gray on this, and then I'm going to show you some of the things that we can do to kind of bring it down. And I mean, you don't hit a ball out of the park every time you put the airbrush on the model. Sometimes you look at it and you go, it's not doing it for me. You might need to do something to it. Now what I intend to do to this once I get it done and get it painted to my satisfaction. It's pretty close. I'd say I'm about 75%. I give myself a B+ right now as to where it is and where I want it to be. But I'll probably put an umber or a brown wash on this as opposed to a gray or a black wash, because I think it'll give it that dirtier look. Okay? I could mix, say, gray with brown, and then hit the airplane. And I've done that in a few spots just to kind of give it a little bit of dirtiness. But there's a lot going on in here. But here's the way you want to do it. Sometimes it can look very randomly organized, and you don't want it to look like that. You want it to look like things are happening all over the airplane. You don't want to have everything going in one direction. You want it to look a little bit busy. So your basic approach is to start with the broad and then work in tighter. And so you'll start with, if you just went in there with basic, spraying and trying to highlight, it would be too much. It would be too spread out. So you want to tighten it up. Like I know, again, Duncan bought that new airbrush, I think that would really help you, and I haven't used mine yet, but to really get what I call get inside the panel more, rather than just dusting over the panel. So enough chit chat. I'm going to break the big rule of mixing paint in the color cup, which they say you should. One guy, I think Dukes Models, he had a dissertation on it and he shamed me, but since he doesn't know where I live, he can't stop me. So I'll just kind of do that. Thing with these grays is sometimes you can be painting along and have the wrong one. It's pretty easy because they all. But actually, that gives you more realism because if it can happen to me here, imagine when it can happen on the aircraft carrier. Can you hold that for me, please? I'm just going to get this paint open. You'll see that I use Mr. Color, and I think Jerry's going to do a thing on paints, and I won't steal his thunder. But you know, I find the Mr. Color paints very forgiving. And I'm going to do one other thing to this paint that will do something really neat to it. This is a semi-gloss paint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some flat base to it from Mr. Yeah. Actually, I got this from Bruffdale. He had a couple of bottles of this stuff that were dry as Kelsey's nuts sitting on the racks, you know. So yeah. So anyways. No, actually, Bobby Kennedy said that, I think, once, and nobody ever knew who Kelsey was or what they were talking about. So I actually just put some of the Restorer, the Mr. Color Restorer. This thing, I'm not kidding, it was like a rock bed. You could turn it over and chunks would fall out. So I put the chunks back in, put the Restorer, and got viable bottles of material. So,
and guys, don't forget, he's not talking about flat plater. It's flat base, which is a very different thing.
So here we go.
So what sort of ratio are you using for the flat?
I just run it up in the color cup and let it stick and drop off, and I think I'm there. Only by spraying do I really get. I'm not real scientific. I mean, there are some very scientific airbrushers that probably could give you a little bit more, but I play with basic pressures, and then I'm going to put some of this material in here and just try to do that. And so I think that.
Do you add any thinner to it as well? Or
yeah, there's thinner in there already.
Thinner in there?
Oh yeah. I always put the thinner in the color cup before the paint because I find if you put the paint in first, it can clog the airbrush up more. So I just put the. But again, like I said, I got a real scolding from Doug. I was watching some technique he was doing, and he goes, "There's those of you that, you know, mix in the color cup, and what are you thinking? What are you smoking?" And I go, "Well, I can tell you what we smoke, Doug. It's October 17th, so we can do that." So here we go. Get that in the wall there. Why isn't that going in? I better go to the bottom one. Okay, what's the story here? It should be. I just had it in. There we go. So I brought a little card to. You can see it's pretty. It's pretty good. The color's just sticking, and it's looking all right. See, I can gun it a little bit. So what I'll do is I'm going to add some gray to this, and I'm going to start touching up. I'm going to paint these pieces and add them to what I'm doing. But what I'm going to do here, you can see I've got some light color in here. I have that picture over there that shows that the dark gray should be extended to the front of the intake. So what I'll do is I will do that. I will bring it to the front, let me see, of the intake, and there it is. So I'll just draw a line up there. I'm not really worried about the tightness of my edges on a camouflage like this. If you're doing like some of these Luftwaffe things like Duncan would do, or any others with these tight little, almost little dots and things, you have to have a little bit more awareness of your pressures and what you're doing. But on this thing, almost the messier, the better. And so that's what I'll do. I'll just paint the dark gray there. And you can see it happening there, right there, right? So it's happening there. And while I got it out, I just can't I can't help myself. I have to go into other areas. And I'm just touching things where I think they're too bright, I knock them down. So I'm just passing the gray over that panel there. It just knocks it down. I can pass the gray around these areas. You see what I'm doing with that gray, that's my top color. I'm just knocking things down a little bit. Okay? Because sometimes you can lighten things too much and you want to knock them down. And then, I'm not going to get to this tonight, but probably my final overcoat will be I will thin the paint, probably 90% thinner, 10% paint, and I'll pass it over the plane and it will tie in everything. So anything stark kind of gets tied in a bit more. If you want to get real pop, a lot of people say I like to get a good gloss on the plane. If you sprayed Mr. Color thinner on your airplane and you put it on in the right consistency, you could have a finish that you could put your finger right into it and see it. And you'd be amazed if you play with thinner and paint, the gloss that you can get. Quite often I don't even need to use gloss coats. I can just bring the paint up that much if I want to. I'm really leery. The more you put on the plane, the more danger you have of something going wrong. So I'm going to just touch this up here. I've got some panels to touch up. And I've got some antennas to paint. And I'm going to paint them. Notice the airbrush, you never stop moving the airbrush. When you stop moving the airbrush and the paint's still coming, you're going to get some nice dripping. But I'll tell you, with Mr. Color, I don't care. I actually do that sometimes and blow the paint into cracks that I need to be filled. It's amazing. I just blow, primer is what I spray a lot of. I just would put primer on here and blow it into the crevices, and it's amazing what you can do with the air. You don't have to be afraid of it. Mr. Color is amazing. You really can't do anything with a model that is going to wreck it using Mr. Color. I like it. You can see right now people go, oh, it's toxic, it's toxic. Well, let's face it. There's no paint that's going to, you know, of course you can use aqueous stuff, but at the end of the day, it's still paint. It's still atomized. It's still in the air. So I just use, normally if I'm spraying this, I'll wear my mask. But it really is no different than nail polish. This stuff, now one thing I don't use is acetone. I've been to a few modelers' houses. It's like a toxic dump site. Like acetone, I don't use it. I use Mr. Color thinner. It's gentler, and you know, you can buy a bottle. I think Neo Tokyo has it in London here for like 14 bucks. And it's really all you need. Like, I really like the Mr. Color products. I like the way they go on.
Larry, have you had a chance to try the new Tamiya lacquers?
Yeah, I'm going to spray some of it tonight.
Okay.
The Tamiya lacquers are wonderful.
And they keep adding to the line. Like there's
They
3
do.
or 4 new colors added last month.
They've just added a bunch of US tactical colors. So there you can see, guys. As I'm talking, I've got the gray on the side. I've got a basic coat. And on that, I'm going to start stressing it. You can see it looks darker than the area behind it, because I haven't done anything to it. I haven't given it any pop. Now I'm just going to paint these doohickeys here and get them done. It's actually fun to paint the thing in sections, because you can do it almost like the real plane. You know, kind of just touched up. Now, some basic airbrushing on aircraft. When you are airbrushing and you want to achieve effects to illustrate streaming, jet stream, or things over the model, aircraft weather in 2 directions, backwards and downwards. I attended, actually I was with, I think, Duncan and Carrie and a few guys down in Chicago at an IPMS regional. I knew that I was going to win 48 scale jets by the fact that the model that should have won arrived. It was actually in Detroit. It arrived, and the guy had it in a box, and he didn't pack it right, and it looked like a disassembled kit when he opened it. But it was beautifully painted, except he did one thing. He airbrushed forward when he weathered it. Otherwise, it was a fantastic Phantom model. So in other words, he sprayed in this direction when he weathered it, and it looked like the plane had been flying in reverse. And I just said to someone who was beside me, what a beautiful model. What a shame that, one, it got broken, but the fact that he, he did that, right? So this little guy seems to want to get on the loose here. I'll just pull him out. So we'll leave that there. Now I'll go to the other side, and then I will do the other side. Now, you guys come in and have a look. What don't you like here? You take a look at it. You see something that's too bright. Saying, geez, Larry, I don't like the looks of that. Let's hear from you guys. Maybe there, I think we got a little bit too much lightness. We could just go back. Lay a little bit of gray like that. Just brings it in nice. What else do you think here? I'm not really happy in here. I'm going to have to spend some time tightening up stuff in here, but I can just show you what we can do. We can do that like that. Keep it busy. Another thing that you want to keep in mind when you're painting is you can use the overhead lighting effect to give the model pop. What I try to do is, although I'm using gray, right? No disputing it. I'll paint the model gray, but I can lighten that gray with a bit of white and then just run it down the spine of the plane gently and hit the high points. And you'd be amazed how that'll give your model pop, because it'll give it a natural lighting effect. It's so easy. A lot of modelers don't do it. They just paint it gray. Imagine how exciting this would be if I just painted it all gray. It would be very, very, would just die on the table. But this thing, you can see, has got a little bit, you can see that the wing has got a little bit of life to it, right? And even though they're grays, you can still do that. Now I'm going to go over here and paint this other side gray. You want the paint on wet, and it just dries. The paint goes on wet, and then it's dry instantly. Now this Mr. Color, I could sand that right now. I could sand it. And I'm going to share another little technique that I use because I think I just like what it does. And sometimes I go overboard. It's just a part of my neurosis, I suppose, in the hobby. Okay, there it is there on the other side. So you can see the gray is on both sides now. All right? So that's what I've done there. Now here's what we'll do next.
You got about 15 left.
Yep. So I've got the gray on there now. Get some gray in there. Some gray in there. Just hit some gray on there. Man, these are little tricky little guys. Get out of there. All right. So now I'm going to take some white. And I'm going to take some white paint. Then I'm going to show you, I'm going to weather these two areas right here. It's probably the best use of my time. I don't even worry. My color cup's got a bit of gray in it. I'm not too worried about that. I'll just give it a little shot here. Get it going pretty good. Now I'm going to get some white. And what I'm going to do now is I am going to stress or de-stress that area with white paint. And this is where your taste and have reference material will help you. So I get some white in there.
Larry, what pressure are you running on your air?
This pressure in this is just a chugger. I don't have a gauge on it, but I'd say it's about 24 to 28.
Very high pressure.
Yeah. If I wanted to bleed it off on a chugger, I just loosen the screw. But at home I have a compressor that I can play. I would like to airbrush around 20. I like airbrushing around 18 to 20. Okay, right in here now I have white. So I'm going to go into this panel and I'll show you what it looks like when I start. And then I'll show you what we'll do. Remember I told you on top there, I want to lighten it up, I want to hit it. So I'll hit some white down the spine there. I think that'll, see, that gives it pop, right? Maybe a bit too much pop, but pop nonetheless. Maybe I want to go in there and get a little crazy in here again. So, sometimes the airbrush will spit a little bit, and I don't worry about it. I can fix that. So here, there we've got some white down the side of that. Okay? It's probably too light right now, but we know that. And I'll hit the other side with some white. You can't really see it very clearly. But there's 4 latches along here. And I'm trying to put white around them, because when I go back with dark, I'm going to hit those latches with some dark, and you will see the effect that you will achieve with it. As again, it's subtle, right? You don't want to go crazy with it. So I'm going to get rid of the white now. Then I'm going to go back with some, how about a little of the new Tamiya lacquer. I brought some flat, I got German gray, I've got flat black. Maybe I'll use my German gray. I don't want it to be too black. I don't want it to die, but I want it to be dark. So I've got a little bit of the Tamiya lacquer here. And
did you find with the thinner in that, because a lot of people, depending on, like, for example, Tamiya's released a paint retarder for their lacquer. Do you ever use paint retarders when you're airbrushing?
no. Nope. No paint retarder. See, I'm a little thin there. Put a little bit more on. That might be a bit better. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to darken this, because you can see where it's pretty light with the white, right? So I'm going to go back and I'm going to darken some areas where I'm working there. I need to spray this a bit more to get rid of the white. There we go. It's still a bit too light. I think I got a bit too much white in there. I don't want to take time to clean this thing too much, because I'm trying to show you some effects. So there you can see I've got some gray at the bottom, okay? And I'm going to darken. Yep. I'll shoot some gray in here, which is a natural shadow, some dark color in there. Okay? Then I'll put some through there, which is a natural shadow. And you can see what it's doing, right? Again, it's all subtle. Then I'll go back in here with some gray. So that's what we've got now. We've got a mix of light. And now I'm going to bring that back in the 5 or so minutes I have left. Because you can see that's too dark now. You know, in some areas it's too light, some areas it's too dark. So I'm going to bring it back. And what I'll do is I'll take my original color that I had, which was this tactical gray. And then you will see what can happen. Like I said, guys, you don't hit it right the first time every time. You have to, you know, and there's nothing you can do with it to ruin it. Don't go, oh my gosh, that's too much. You can always bring it back. So don't be discouraged. It's just a matter of playing with it to taste. And it's your taste, okay? If it looks good to you, then it probably looks good. So why don't we bring back Tamiya paint mixer, stirrer.
Great, wonderful invention.
Yes, they're good.
Hobby also makes them as well. Tamiya ones are.
Theirs are a little broader.
Yeah, a little bit broader.
So now I've got my gray paint back again. Let's see how I'm doing here. You can see there's my gray. So then I can go back to where I was. And I might, if I have time, I'll do one more step here. Hobby and toy.
Hobby and toy, you can get them there. They're Tamiya stir sticks. Just find a model for hobby and toy. I think Broadtails has them as well.
So you see, guys, I'm bringing back the gray on the side, and I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, again, I can't get it perfect every time, but I'll do one more thing before we go, just to kind of bring it along a little more. So I'm going back with the gray, and it's subtle, but you can see in there you've got a dark, you've got different things going on. It's a cocktail of different colors of gray. But there's one more thing that I'll do, and I think that should probably allow us to finish up and see something achievable. So there we go there. Again, it's subtle. You're probably, people in the back are thinking like, what's he doing? He just goes from one gray to the other, but it's subtle, right? What's going on in there is subtle.
On the video, you can certainly see where you've, like just behind the canopy in the center line,
yeah,
where you've popped it a bit, and it's pretty obvious.
Yeah. It's not the most exciting. My wife always says to me, don't you ever use any nice colors like red? And, you know, she wants to come down and see something exciting. Okay, but I'm saying,
I think you should paint one in pink sometime.
I'm thinking, hubba hubba, baby, this is it, right? It's
do a frazzle.
You could do one up for breast.
yeah.
Well, some of those World War I things are pretty colorful. Oh, the Germans in particular. You did a red airplane, one.
Do it for
I
me.
did.
Yeah, you've done a red plane.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to do for the final step, just to kind of leave everybody with a little bit of an impression. I'm going to take my original color, which is that gray, and I'm mixing it in the color cup. And what I'm going to do to this is take white, and I'm going to highlight my original color. And this will be where again, I'm moving quickly here. And so just to kind of show you guys what you do, I have lightened, in the color cup, I have lightened my original color. Okay, now, I don't have time to get too silly with the airbrush. I'm going to hope I can get it going pretty delicately. So I'm going to go back here. If you look at that now, you can see it starting to pop. And what I've tried to do is give it some natural shading. And I'm sorry if everybody over there, there's 4 latches there. And I've gone light in between those latches just to give those latches a little bit of, and then in the middle of this panel here, see, I just put something in the middle of that panel, look what happens.
Sit it still for a second.
Like I said, you just want to keep it interesting. And a real trick to keeping when you're weathering is a lot of people go in one direction. I'll show you something really neat. I'll just pick a panel. Why don't I go here? And I'm going to take this color. I'll go this way with a line. Then I go this way. And it's just amazing the interesting effects you can get just by crossing the lines, just by letting more material hit the model, just with air pressure. I mean, you don't want to go the same way all the time like this, right? You don't want to be weathering the same way because it just won't look random. You want to go, you know, at right angles. You tend not to cross or get too geometric, but going at right angles will allow you to achieve some interesting effects. And I mean, I can just go all over this with this lighter color and bring the model, you know, join the model together. And I'll do the other side.
About 2 minutes.
The more paint you put on, it looks like the paint's coming out.
Well, Bob's point, I'll just take that point. It's a good point. I'm really just layering the paint. I am not really. I try to go a bit thinner, and you want to do that. You want to layer the paint. You don't want to put on the paint too thick. Like this paint is fairly thin. This is addicting. I could sit here for hours doing this. But you can come and see, you can see to me, you can see the panel. The panels are starting to get a bit of interesting effect to them, right? And like I said, I'm not saying that this is the end of it, but you could go back and make it, but you can see what it does. It kind of blends in the camouflage, so the dark gray isn't stark. From that, it looks more like this. You can kind of see that it's a little bit stark, but it's blended, right?
Just
Like
leave
that.
the kit there and we're done.
Pardon me?
We're done.
All right.
So thank you very much.
I do. No, I would take the original color and thin the crap out of it and just dust it over the model. Pardon me? Yeah, you can barely tell there's anything hitting it. But it's subtle. It just ties up anything that maybe you don't like that isn't right.
So you don't worry about making it darker, you just use the original color.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Larry.
No problem. See right there, I'll do it now. I'll just dust it over now.
Now, do you dust over the margin?